You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, you might remember that last summer, Donald Trump was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in a case against E. Jean Carroll. He lost $5 million and then did it again, lost $83 million. So he's appealed that verdict, and we finally have an answer to that appeal right now. So can you explain what just happened here?
Yeah, Brian. So the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, a federal appeals court, just resolved Donald Trump's first appeal, the appeal of the jury verdict awarding E. Jean Carroll $5 million for Donald Trump having been found liable of sexual abuse and defamation. And the Second Circuit Court of Appeals just shut Trump down, said that the jury's verdict is affirmed. The judge in the case, Judge Kaplan, made no erroneous rulings. Donald Trump has failed to carry his burden to prove that the trial court judge did something wrong to the prejudice of Donald Trump's rights. And so this is not the end of the line for this particular case, but it is very close. So with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals saying Donald Trump's appeal is denied, the only thing left is for Trump to ask the full court sitting en banc, all of the Second Circuit Court of Appeal judges, to revisit the unanimous ruling that was just handed down by the three-judge panel. Very unlikely that will happen. And then the even longer shot Donald Trump has is he can try to bubble this thing up to the Supreme Court, but there is absolutely no basis for the Supreme Court to accept this case for review. So like I say, it's not the end of the line, but I think we can see the end of the line from here.
I can already see Clarence Thomas saying, no basis, you say? No, try me. Challenge accepted. Glenn, with that said then, so just to be clear, to clarify here, this is the $5 million award to E. Jean Carroll, but it doesn't yet have anything to do with the $83.3 million award that she was awarded as the result of the second defamation trial. Is that correct?
Correct. That was a separate jury award, and that one is still pending appeal, and I suspect the Second Circuit Court of Appeals will get to that one in due course. We may see a ruling in the coming weeks or months in that case.
Now, Glenn, a lot of the cases that we've seen Trump engaged in, a lot of the prosecution that we've seen him engaged in, that's been wiped away as the result of him becoming president-elect. Obviously, the two federal cases in D.C. and also in Florida have been wiped away. There's a pending decision right now to see whether the Georgia and even the New York sentencing are going to stand. But does this case right here, this defamation case, as it relates to E. Jean Carroll, does that have any chance of getting wiped away by virtue of the fact that Trump was elected president?
There is no lawful basis or avenue for this case to be tossed out simply because Donald Trump will be sworn in as president, assuming he's sworn in on January 20th. The Department of Justice is not a party to this case. This was between two private people, two private litigants, E. Jean Carroll and Donald Trump. There is absolutely no basis or vehicle for any other entity, including the Department of Justice, to come in and say, you know what? Because Donald Trump has been sworn in, we have to set aside or throw out this civil judgment that was entered against him and affirmed by a federal appeals court. None. Now, anytime we caveat anything we say or predict with, there is no lawful basis. I think you referenced it a minute ago. Guys like Clarence Thomas may say, hold my beer, I'll come up with a basis. So, but no, as of right now, I don't expect there will be any way to wipe the slate clean of this one.
Look, Trump has a long history of refusing to pay contractors, refusing to pay money that he owes to people. What if he just decides that he's not going to pay E. Jean Carroll? What is there to compel him to pay? I mean, he's not gonna. It's not gonna be like the court is gonna be able to send officers to go after him if he becomes the president of the United States, if he's sitting in the Oval Office. And so, if he opts just not to pay, not to respect the ruling in this case, what happens then?
A great question and a realistic possibility, unfortunately, because we know Donald Trump all too well. So first, I will say, you know, he may have to sell some more golden sneakers or personally autographed Bibles or Trump cologne. I'm not sure who wants to smell like Donald Trump to satisfy the money judgment. But in the event he does, he just says, you know what, I'm not paying, even though I've been ordered to pay by a court. There are civil enforcement mechanisms that could be used by E. Jean Carroll and her lawyers to pursue making sure Donald Trump pays on this, money judgment that he owes. And I don't think there is anything in the law as it presently exists that would allow Donald Trump to sidestep this civil judgment or refuse to pay it just because he's been sworn in as president. So, at the end of the day, I think this money judgment will have to be satisfied by Donald Trump one way or the other.
I mean, is it possible that E. Jean Carroll would be able to put a lien on like Mar-a-Lago, for example? Would she be able to garnish the wages of the president of the United States? I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous on its face, but at the same time, when you owe somebody money and they refuse to pay, you'll garnish wages, for example. The court will garnish their wages. And so is it possible that we could see Trump's paycheck be less money by virtue of the fact that most of it's going to go to E. Jean Carroll?
Yeah, in theory, that is possible, garnishing the wages of a sitting president. I also think liens against his assets is absolutely in play. I don't know that it will come to that. I mean, to say that would be so supremely embarrassing, not just to Donald Trump, who doesn't really have the capacity to feel embarrassed, but to the United States of America. So, yeah, but in theory, there is no reason that those civil enforcement mechanisms you just mentioned, like garnishing wages and putting liens against the assets of somebody who owes a money judgment, all of that should remain in play.
Glenn, if this thing does go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court and they do decide to do a favor, though, for Donald Trump, what kind of precedent would that establish that all of a sudden a liable private litigant who owes money because of sexual abuse and defamation could then be protected by the highest court in the land, which, by the way, opts not to hear hundreds of thousands of cases otherwise, but now suddenly would opt to hear this one?
It would say that a president of the United States is not only above our criminal laws, which unfortunately the Supreme Court in Trump versus United States, the presidential immunity case, has already declared that for most of his conduct in office, certainly his core constitutional functions and official government acts as president are above and beyond the reach of the criminal law. But it would be the Supreme Court going one step further and say, you know what, we've already done criminal presidents a solid with respect to not being prosecuted for their crimes. We're going to put them beyond the reach of our civil laws as well. So if private litigants win civil suits and money damages against the president, we're going to say that that president need not pay up. Would I put that past this Supreme Court, the radical right-wing 5 justices? No way.
And let's finish off with this. We had the result of this case, this jury trial, back in May of 2023. So that's about 18 months ago, 19 months ago. Does that mean that in seeking either en banc review at the appeals court or even review by the U.S. Supreme Court, that we may be here another 18 months to see the final outcome of this case?
No, the deadline for filing a petition for en banc review is very short-fused. It's something like 10 to 30 days. I don't remember precisely how quickly a petition for review en banc must be filed, but it must be filed very promptly after the decision by the 3-judge panel. And then, petitioning the Supreme Court for review, which thousands and thousands and thousands of people do every year, and the vast majority, overwhelming majority, are rejected. That can take some time, but I don't expect it to get any traction with the Supreme Court. And 2, if he does file for a petition for review in the Supreme Court, I think we'd probably see action on that pretty quickly.
Okay, well, obviously a little more to go here to wait for the final resolution in Trump's in total $88 million that he owes to E. Jean Carroll. I know, sitting here in December of 2024, this is probably not the case that we thought we would be talking about, but at this point, I think we take what we can get. So for those who are watching right now, if you want to follow along with this one, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.